This is my true story. My biological son refused to give me $5,000 for my life-saving surgery, but my adopted son, who had next to nothing, handed me a crumpled envelope. What I discovered inside shattered my heart more than any illness ever could. Before that, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And please subscribe to this channel so that my stories can reach more people. The air in the examination room was sterile and thin, smelling of rubbing alcohol and bad news. I sat on the edge of the table, the paper crinkling under me, watching Dr. Miller tap his pen against my chart. My chest felt tight, like a rusted engine struggling to turn over. I am 68 years old, a man who has built and broken things with these hands, but I couldn't fix the valve inside my own body. "Elias," Dr. Miller said, his voice dropping an octave, "the blockage is significant. You need the surgery within the month. Without it, you won't see next Christmas." I didn't flinch. I have faced boardrooms and betrayal. I wasn't about to let a heart condition see me sweat. "Give it to me straight, Doc. What is the damage?" $5,000, he replied. "Out of pocket immediately, to secure the surgical team and the bed." I nodded slowly, my face a mask of iron. $5,000 was a fraction of what I had tucked away in the hidden trust, but for the sake of the life I portrayed, a retired teacher in a modest flat, it was supposed to be a fortune. I left the office and walked to my car, my mind already moving pieces across a chessboard. It was time to see if the blood I raised was worth the name I gave it. That evening, I sat in my armchair, the shadows of the city stretching across my living room floor. I dialed Marcus, my biological son, the elite lawyer who bragged about his billing hours and his Italian leather shoes, picked up on the fourth ring. "Dad, I'm right in the middle of a merger. This better be quick," Marcus snapped. "I saw the doctor today, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice level and calm. "I need a heart surgery. It costs $5,000. I don't have it on hand." There was a long, hollow silence. I could almost hear his brain calculating, not the cost of my life, but the cost of his inheritance. "5,000? Marcus finally sighed, his tone shifting to one of condescending logic. "Dad, let's be realistic for a second. You're 68. You've had a good run, but your heart is failing anyway. Putting $5,000 into a surgery that might only give you another year or two? It's a bad investment at your age." I felt a coldness settle in my gut that had nothing to do with my illness. "A bad investment," I repeated quietly. "Is that how you see your father?" "I'm a man of facts, Dad," he said, sounding like he was lecturing a first-year associate. "Why throw good money after a lost cause? You should just focus on being comfortable. I can't justify spending that kind of capital on a gamble." "I understand perfectly, Marcus," I said. My thumb hovered over the record button on my desk. I had heard enough. I won't bring it up again. "Good. I'm glad you're being sensible," he said before the line went dead. I hung up the phone and looked at the recording. He didn't know I was testing the weight of his soul. He didn't know that with those words, he had just signed his own financial death warrant. The silence in my small apartment was heavy, but my mind was clear. The parasite had shown his teeth. Now it was time for the host to stop feeding him. The echoes of Marcus's clinical rejection still hung in the air of my living room, cold and sharp. I sat in the darkness for a long time, watching the rain streak against the glass like tears on a face that had forgotten how to cry. My biological son had weighed my life against a price tag and found it lacking. It was a bitter pill, but I had always been a man who preferred the ugly truth to a beautiful lie. A sudden rhythmic knocking at the front door broke my thoughts. I checked my watch. It was nearly 11. I stood up, my chest giving a dull, protesting thud, and opened the door. Arjun stood there, his delivery vest soaked through and his face pale with exhaustion. He looked like a man who had been running a race for years without a finish line in sight. "Pop," he panted, stepping into the hallway. "I saw your message about the doctor. I came as soon as my shift ended." "You're drenched, Arjun. Come in," I said, my voice maintaining its steady alpha grip. I led him to the kitchen, where the light of the single bulb overhead felt too bright for the conversation we were about to have. Arjun didn't sit down. His hands were shaking slightly as he reached into the deep pocket of his wet vest. He pulled out a thick yellow envelope, its edges crumpled and stained with water. He placed it on the table between us with a heavy thud. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. It's $5,000, Arjun whispered. He wiped the rain from his eyes, but his gaze remained fixed on mine. It's everything. My savings, my overtime, the money I was putting aside for the down payment on that fixer-upper. It's all there. I looked at the envelope, then back at him. Arjun, you've worked 2 jobs for 3 years to save that. That house is your dream. It's your future. Why would you give it to a man whose heart is, as the experts say, a bad investment? Arjun took a step forward, his voice cracking but firm. Don't ever say that, Pop. You took me in when I had nothing. You taught me how to be a man. You are my father. Without you, a house is just a pile of bricks. I don't care about the money. I care about you breathing. I felt a surge of something stronger than my illness, a profound sense of clarity. This money represents your freedom, son, I said, testing the steel in his character one last time. If you give it to me, you start back at 0. Then I start at 0, he said without a second of hesitation. As long as you're there to see me do it, take it, please. I've already called the clinic. They're waiting for the deposit. I reached out and placed my hand over the envelope, not to take the money, but to acknowledge the sacrifice. I had spent decades building a hidden empire of wealth, yet the most valuable thing in this room was the integrity of the man standing in front of me. Marcus had looked at my life and saw a liability. Arjun looked at my life and saw his world. Go home and get some sleep, Arjun, I said softly, my mind already finalizing the next phase of my plan. You've done more than enough. I'll handle the hospital from here. You'll have the surgery? He asked, hope finally breaking through his fatigue. I will, I promised, and I guarantee you the return on this investment will be more than you ever imagined. I watched him leave, his shoulders lighter despite the rain. The test was complete. I had found my heir. Now, I just had to survive the knife so I could begin the harvest. The crumpled yellow envelope sat on my bedside table, a silent witness to a loyalty that Marcus couldn't comprehend. As the hospital staff prepped me for the procedure, the rhythmic thump-thump of my failing heart felt like a drum counting down to a battle. I wasn't afraid of the anesthesia or the blade. I was focused on the reconstruction that would happen after the surgeon was done with me. The surgery was a success. When I finally drifted back into consciousness, the air was thick with the scent of rubbing alcohol and the steady artificial hum of recovery. My chest burned with a deep searing heat, but the rhythm of the monitor was different now, steady, strong, and certain. I looked to my right. Arjun was there, slumped in a narrow, uncomfortable plastic chair. He was still wearing his delivery boots, his head lolling to the side in a deep sleep of pure exhaustion. He had stayed. A nurse entered quietly to check my vitals. He's been here since they rolled you out, she whispered, nodding toward Arjun. He wouldn't leave, even when we told him he could go home. He's a good man, I said, my voice raspy but firm. The best I know. Once she left, I reached for my phone on the nightstand. I had work to do that required a different kind of precision than a scalpel. I dialed my private banker, a man who had managed the Elias Trust for 20 years under strict NDAs. Elias, the voice on the other end said, sounding surprised. I heard you were in surgery. How are you? I'm alive, Jonathan, and I'm ready to move, I said, watching Arjun stir in his sleep. The test is over. I want you to liquidate the offshore holdings in the Cayman account. Transfer $40 million into a new entity. We'll call it Arjun Holdings. I also need a top-tier real estate broker on the line by morning. $40 million? Elias, that's a massive shift. What are we buying? I looked at a get well card that had been delivered an hour prior. It was a generic, pre-printed card from Marcus's law firm, signed by his paralegal. No visit, no call, just a piece of cardstock to fulfill a social obligation. I'm buying a specific apartment complex in the city, I said, my eyes narrowing. The one on 5th and Madison. Marcus lives in the penthouse there. I want the deed to that building in my hand before I'm discharged. And call my attorney, Sarah. I need to update my will. I'm removing a parasite and naming a successor. Understood, Jonathan replied. I'll have the preliminary papers ready for your signature by noon. I hung up and let the phone rest on my chest. I looked at the ceiling, feeling the new valve. Working perfectly. Marcus had told me I wasn't worth the investment. He was about to find out that when you treat people like assets, you eventually get liquidated. Arjun groaned in his sleep, his hand twitching as if he were still gripping the handlebars of his delivery bike. I closed my eyes, a cold, strategic peace settling over me. I was the ghost in the hospital, a man the world thought was dying, while I was actually being reborn as their most formidable nightmare. The steady, rhythmic beat in my chest was no longer a ticking clock, it was a drum of war. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, the paperwork for Argent Holdings was already finalized. I walked out of the sliding glass doors into the crisp morning air, feeling a strength I hadn't known in years. My body was healing, but my mind was already 3 moves ahead of the sun who thought he had outsmarted time. I spent the next week in a quiet whirlwind of activity. From my small kitchen table, I directed millions of dollars with the clinical precision of a general. I bought the luxury high-rise on 5th and Madison, the very glass and steel tower where Marcus spent his evenings looking down on the city. I didn't just buy the building. I bought every debt, every service contract, and every lease associated with it. My phone buzzed on the mahogany table. It was Marcus. I waited for the third ring before answering, my voice calm and alpha, betraying nothing of my new vitality. "Hello, Marcus," I said. "Dad, I've got a minute between depositions." Marcus started, his voice thick with a fake, hurried concern. "I heard you're out of the hospital. Glad you survived the gamble. But listen, I'm in a real bind. The building I live in, the Pinnacle, was just sold to some anonymous holding company. The new owners are being total hard asses about the lease renewals." I leaned back, sipping a cup of black coffee. "That sounds stressful, Marcus. I thought you were a top-tier lawyer. Can't you just litigate your way out of it?" "It's not that simple," he snapped, his true colors showing through the cracks of his frustration. "These people are ghosts. They operate through a shell company called Argent Holdings. It's a ridiculous name, probably some upstart lottery winner who doesn't know how to treat high-value tenants. They've frozen all luxury upgrades and are auditing every single unit." "Maybe they just value transparency," I replied, my tone dry. "Or maybe they're just looking for a better investments for their property. Whatever. It's a high-stakes world, Dad. You wouldn't understand the pressure of maintaining a certain lifestyle. I have an image to protect. If I lose this penthouse, it looks bad to the partners." "I understand perfectly, Marcus," I said, and for the first time in months, I felt a genuine smile touch my lips. "Image is everything to a man with no substance. But don't worry, I'm sure the new landlord will give you exactly what you deserve." "Yeah, well, I'm going to find out who this Argent is and bury him in paperwork," Marcus growled. "I'll talk to you later, Dad. I've got a real crisis to manage." I hung up without saying goodbye. I looked at the deed sitting on my desk, signed and notarized. Marcus was looking for a ghost, never realizing the man he had left to die was the one holding the keys to his front door. He had called my life a bad investment, but I was about to show him the true cost of a bad tenant. I picked up the phone and dialed my property manager. "This is Elias," I said. "Send the audit team to Penthouse B. I want a full report on every violation, every late payment, and every scratch on the floor. It's time to start the eviction process." The trap was set, and the bait was a simple dinner invitation. I wanted to see the parasite in his natural habitat one last time before I cut off the blood supply. I chose a quiet, upscale bistro near Marcus's office, a place where he felt important, surrounded by the clinking of crystal and the soft murmur of power. I was seated when Marcus and his wife Sarah arrived 20 minutes late. Sarah didn't apologize. She simply sighed and checked her diamond-encrusted watch, her eyes scanning the room as if looking for someone more relevant than her father-in-law. Marcus sat down, his movements jerky and stressed. He looked like a man whose foundation was cracking, yet he still wore his arrogance like a shield. "Elias, let's make this quick," Sarah said, pushing her menu aside without looking at it. "We have a gala at the gallery in an hour, and Marcus is already dealing with that ridiculous landlord situation at the Pinnacle." "I thought you'd want to celebrate my recovery," I said, my voice as calm as a deep lake. I watched Marcus pour himself a glass of wine, his hands trembling slightly. "Celebrate?" Marcus scoffed, leaning in. "Dad, we've been over this. You're fine. The surgery worked. But honestly, this dinner is another expense you probably can't afford. You should be saving every penny for a decent assisted living facility. I've been looking into some state-funded options for you. They aren't 5-star, but they're a much better investment than you trying to maintain that dusty apartment." I took a slow sip of my water, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "A state-funded home, Marcus, after I raised you, put you through law school, and stood by you when you were nothing? Business is business, Dad, Marcus said, his tone dripping with the cold logic he used to justify his own greed. Resources are finite. You're a retired teacher with a bad heart. I'm a partner at a top firm. The math just doesn't favor you. You need to accept your place in the food chain. I see, I replied. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a thick, manila legal folder. Speaking of the food chain, I have some documents regarding your residence at the Pinnacle. I know you've been struggling to reach the owner of Argent Holdings. Marcus's eyes lit up with a predatory spark. You have a lead? Who is it? Some foreign investor? Tell me, I'll have my team bring them to the table for a settlement. The owner is closer than you think, I said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a formal eviction notice, stamped with the seal of the city and signed by the chairman of the board. My signature sat at the bottom, bold and unmistakable. Marcus stared at the paper. His face went from a flush of excitement to the sickly gray of a corpse. Sarah leaned over, her mouth dropping open as she read the name on the deed. This is a mistake, Marcus stammered, his voice losing its alpha edge and turning into a pathetic squeak. You? You're the landlord? I'm the representative of the trust that owns your life, Marcus, I said, standing up and towering over him. The restaurant seemed to go quiet around us. You told me $5,000 was a bad investment. I disagreed. I decided to invest $12 million in your building instead, specifically so I could personally serve you this notice. You have 72 hours to vacate. I've already audited your unit, and I'm charging you for every luxury upgrade you made without prior written consent. Dad, you can't do this, Sarah shrieked, her social mask shattered. Business is business, Sarah, I said, echoing Marcus's own words back at him, like a death sentence. And right now, you're both a very poor investment. I turned and walked out, leaving the check on the table for them to handle. My heart beat steady and strong, a drum of justice in the night. The restaurant door closed behind me, muffled but final, cutting off the sound of Sarah's frantic protests and Marcus's stunned silence. I didn't look back. I stepped into the cool evening air, feeling a surge of energy that had nothing to do with the surgery and everything to do with the mission. Marcus had spent his life thinking he was the smartest man in the room because he understood the law. He was about to learn that the law is just a tool, and I owned the workshop. I spent the next morning in the plush, wood-paneled office of my lead attorney, Sarah Thompson. She was a shark I had kept on retainer for decades, her existence hidden from my family's prying eyes. She placed a stack of documents on the mahogany desk, her expression as clinical as a surgeon's. The eviction is moving at double speed, Elias, she said, her voice crisp. But that's just the surface. As you requested, I looked into the expenses Marcus has been filing through his firm. It seems he's been using his expense account to cover the lease on his mistress's apartment and several offshore gambling debts. He thought no one was looking because he was the one doing the looking. And the senior partners? I asked, leaning back in my chair. They were very interested to hear from one of their largest silent clients, she replied with a thin smile. I've hinted that if Marcus remains a partner, the Elias Trust will be moving its entire legal portfolio and its $30 million in annual billables to their competitors. They're launching an internal ethics audit as we speak. I nodded, my mind visualizing the dominoes as they began to tip. I wasn't just taking his home, I was dismantling the pedestal he stood on to look down at the world. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Marcus. This time there was no lecture on logistics. His voice was ragged, the sound of a man who had spent the night staring at the ruins of his life. Dad, listen to me, he pleaded, the arrogance finally stripped away. The firm, they called me in. They're talking about an audit. They're talking about disbarment. You have to call them. You have to tell them this is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Marcus? I asked, my voice calm and low. Like the misunderstanding where you told your dying father he was a bad investment? I'm simply following your lead. I'm doing an audit of my own resources. It turns out, having a son who is a legal and moral liability is a drain on my portfolio. I was just stressed, he shouted, a flash of his old temper sparking through the desperation. You can't destroy my career over one phone call. I worked for this. I earned this. No, Marcus, I corrected him firmly. You rented it. You rented your status with my name and your luxury with your lies. Now the lease is up. What do you want? He sobbed. Money? I'll pay you back for the surgery 10 times over. Just stop the audit. I looked at a framed photo on my desk of a much younger Marcus, before the greed had hollowed out his eyes. It's not about the money, Marcus. It never was. It was about the heart. You didn't think mine was worth $5,000. Now, I don't think your career is worth a single phone call. I hung up and signaled to Sarah to proceed with the final filings. By the end of the day, Marcus would be locked out of his office. His bank accounts would be flagged for investigation, and his name would be a stain on the firm's letterhead. The systematic takedown was nearly complete. The parasite was losing its grip, and for the first time in 68 years, I felt truly clean. The wreckage of Marcus's career was still smoldering in the background of my mind as I drove toward the edge of the city. The contrast was stark. While one son was busy counting his losses, I was about to help another count his blessings. I had asked Arjun to meet me at a specific address, a sprawling, emerald-green plot of land overlooking the valley. When I pulled up, I saw Arjun's battered delivery bike leaning against a fence. He was standing near the edge of the property, looking out at the horizon. He still wore his work uniform, though he had finally scrubbed the exhaustion from his face. He turned as I approached, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of the newly constructed luxury villa sitting at the top of the hill, its floor-to-ceiling glass windows reflecting the afternoon sun. "Pop, why are we here?" Arjun asked, his voice hesitant. Is this one of the properties you're auditing?" "No, Arjun," I said, walking up to stand beside him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a heavy set of keys, the silver shimmering in the light. "I told you that your $5,000 was an investment. I'm here to show you the return." I led him toward a smaller building near the main gates, a sleek, modern office space equipped with the latest logistics technology. I pushed the door open, revealing a team of 3 lawyers and a seasoned operations manager sitting around a conference table. "Arjun, meet your executive team," I said calmly. "This is the headquarters of Apex Logistics. I've secured the contracts. The fleet of vans is being delivered tomorrow, and the seed capital, $2 million, is already in the corporate account. You aren't a delivery driver anymore. You are the CEO." Arjun's knees seemed to buckle. He grabbed the edge of the table, his breath coming in short, jagged gasps. "Pop, I can't. I don't understand. This is millions. I only gave you 5,000. I didn't even want it back. I just wanted you to live. And that is exactly why you are the only man I trust with this," I replied, my voice dropping into that deep, authoritative tone. "Wealth is a weapon, Arjun. In the hands of someone like Marcus, it's used to cut people down. In the hands of a man who would give his last penny to save a life, it's used to build a kingdom. You proved your character when you thought I was a broke old man. Now you get to see what a man of character can do with power." I handed him a leather-bound folder. Inside was the deed to the villa and the articles of incorporation for the business. "The house is yours. The company is yours. I've already set up a trust for your future children. You'll never have to work 2 jobs again, unless you're doing it because you love the hustle." Arjun looked at the documents, and then at me, and finally burst into tears. They weren't the tears of a victim, but the relief of a man who had finally been seen. He hugged me, a grip so tight it tested my new heart valve, and for a moment the alpha in me softened. "Thank you, Pop," he whispered. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I said, patting his back. "Just run this company with the same heart you used to save mine. The world has enough parasites, Arjun. It needs more kings." As we walked toward the villa to inspect his new home, I felt a profound sense of completion. The justice I was meting out wasn't just about punishment, it was about balance. For every Marcus I tore down, I would build an Arjun up. The warmth of Arjun's gratitude was still a steady glow in my chest when I arrived at my new office the following Monday. I had moved my base of operations to a high-rise downtown, a space that commanded respect without needing to shout. I was looking over the final liquidation reports for Marcus's remaining assets when my secretary buzzed. "Mr. Elias, your son is in the lobby," she said, her voice hesitant. "He doesn't have an appointment, and he's causing a bit of a scene." "Send him up," I said, leaning back in my leather chair. I didn't need to check the security cameras to know what I'd see. I adjusted my cuffs and waited. The doors burst open. Marcus stumbled in, and for a moment I almost didn't recognize the man I had raised. His expensive Italian suit was wrinkled, his tie was crooked, and there were dark, desperate bags under his eyes. He looked 30 years older than he had at dinner. The alpha lawyer who had lectured me on investments was gone. In his place was a man who had finally realized he was the one at the bottom of the food chain. "Dad, please," he sobbed, nearly tripping as he rushed toward my desk. He didn't sit. He dropped to his knees, reaching out as if to grab my hand. I pulled back, my expression as cold as a mountain peak. "They've taken everything. The firm fired me. The bank froze my personal accounts pending the audit and the eviction. The movers are at the apartment right now, Dad. Sarah left me this morning. She said she didn't sign up for poverty." "It sounds like Sarah is a very pragmatic investor, Marcus," I said, my voice low and steady. "She saw a declining asset and she divested. Isn't that what you taught me?" "Don't do this," he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "I was wrong. I was stressed. I was arrogant. I was a fool. But we're blood, Dad. You can't let your own son sleep on the street. Just one check. Just $500,000 to clear my debts and get a new start. That's all I need. It's nothing to you." I stood up slowly, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the city. I could see the roof of the building I had just bought for Arjun in the distance. "You're right about one thing, Marcus. 500,000 is nothing to me, but it's a lot to spend on a bad investment." "I'm not an investment. I'm your son," he screamed, his voice cracking with a mix of rage and terror. I turned around, my eyes locking onto his. The room felt smaller as I exerted the full weight of my presence. A son is someone who honors his father. A son is someone who sees a man's life as having value beyond a bank balance. You stopped being my son the moment you decided my heart wasn't worth $5,000. You didn't see a father, you saw a liability that was taking too long to die. "I'll change," he promised, clutching at the edge of my mahogany desk. "I'll do anything. I'll work for you. I'll be your driver, your clerk, anything." I already have a successor, Marcus, and he didn't need a lesson in humanity to earn his place. I sat back down and pressed the intercom. "Security, please escort this gentleman out. He is trespassing." "Dad! No, you can't!" Marcus shrieked as two large men in suits entered the room. They lifted him by his arms, his expensive shoes scuffing against the floor. He looked pathetic, a beggar at the gates of a kingdom he had once thought he owned. I didn't look up as they dragged him out. I simply picked up my pen and went back to my reports. The parasite had been removed. Now there was only one thing left to do: enjoy the life that a good man had saved. The image of Marcus being dragged away, his pride in tatters, was the final weight lifted from my shoulders. Justice is only as strong as the hand that enforces it. 2 days later, I stood in the private terminal, the morning sun glinting off polished silver wings. The air was quiet, scented with expensive leather and the promise of distance. Arjun stood beside me, clutching his passport like a shield. "Pup, I still feel like I'm dreaming," he whispered. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me I have a delivery to make." "The only thing you're delivering today, Arjun, is yourself to a well-earned rest," I said. I felt a surge of vitality. I was no longer a man on borrowed time. We were almost to the jet bridge when a commotion broke out. Marcus had breached the main doors, looking as though he hadn't slept in 48 hours. Airport guards intercepted him, but he screamed my name through the glass-walled terminal. "Dad! Elias! Look at me!" he wailed, his face contorted. "They're taking everything. I'm going to be a nobody. You have to help me." I turned slowly. I didn't feel anger, only a profound, hollow pity, the look a gardener gives an uprooted weed. I walked toward the security line, motioning for the guards to pause. Marcus collapsed against the stanchions, gasping, "Please, just one more chance. I'll admit I was wrong." I adjusted my blazer, my voice calm and final. "You were right about one thing, Marcus. You told me that at 68, a $5,000 surgery was a bad investment. You looked at a life and saw only a ledger." I let the silence settle. "The surgery was a bad investment for you. Because of your greed, you lost a fortune, a career, and a father. You chose the money. Arjun invested in the man. Now he has a kingdom, and you have nothing. Dad, I'm your blood." He screamed as they pulled him back. "Blood is a biological fact, Marcus. Family is a choice." I turned my back, the sound of his sobbing drowned out by the whine of jet engines. I stepped into the cabin, taking my seat next to the man who had saved me. The Alpha had purged the traitor. It was time to fly. The hum of the aircraft was a steady, soothing vibration beneath my feet, as we leveled out at 30,000 feet. Outside the window, the world was a vast, blue expanse, the clouds looking like solid ground from this height. I leaned back in the plush leather seat, feeling the rhythmic, powerful thrum of my heart. It was a strange, beautiful thing to feel truly alive at 68, knowing that every beat was a gift I had fought for and won. Arjun was staring out his own window, a look of quiet contemplation on his face. He hadn't touched the gourmet meal in front of him. I watched him for a moment, seeing the same humble boy who had stood in my kitchen with a rain-soaked envelope. Even with the world at his feet, he hadn't changed. "You're very quiet, son," I said, my voice calm and resonant in the cabin. Arjun turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "I was just thinking about Marcus, Pop. I know what he did was unforgivable. I know why you had to be so hard on him. But does it ever stop hurting, knowing your own blood failed the test?" I looked at my hands, hands that had worked, hands that had built, and hands that had finally cut the cord. "The hurt is just a reminder that you have a heart, Arjun. Marcus didn't fail me, he failed himself. He chose to live as a parasite, and a parasite cannot survive without a host that is willing to be drained. I simply stopped being a victim, so I could start being a father to the man who deserved one." "I just never realized how much power you had," Arjun whispered. "Power is nothing without purpose," I replied, leaning closer. "I spent 40 years building that trust in the shadows. I lived like a simple teacher because I wanted to see who people were when they thought I had nothing to offer them. Marcus saw a man to be managed. You saw a man to be loved. That is the only lesson that matters." I reached over and patted his shoulder, my grip firm and sure. "You saved my life, Arjun. Not just with the $5,000, but by proving that loyalty still exists in a world of investments. The villa, the company, this flight, it's not a reward. It's a responsibility. You have the heart. Now you have the power to protect others who are being stepped on by men like Marcus." Arjun nodded, a new spark of determination lighting up his eyes. "I won't let you down, Pop, I promise." "I know you won't," I said, closing my eyes as a deep, soul-level peace settled over me. The Alpha in me was satisfied. I had secured the legacy, punished the traitor, and elevated the worthy. As the plane chased the sunset toward Switzerland, I realized that my heart wasn't just repaired. It was full. I had spent a lifetime accumulating wealth, but my greatest success was finally finding a son who knew that some things are priceless. The justice was served, the lesson was taught, and for the first time in my life, I could finally rest.